Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking closely at, well, a pretty significant topic: sexual desire before marriage. And specifically the perspective on waiting until marriage that comes from this text, 5 Minutes Bible.
Right. And this is something that really could resonate whether you're young, maybe dating someone, engaged, or even just thinking about the future, you know?
Absolutely. So our goal here, our sort of mission for this deep dive, is to really unpack the arguments presented.
Yeah, to understand why this perspective values waiting and what the key takeaways might be for anyone listening.
Okay, let's dive in. A really foundational idea in this piece is that sex itself isn't presented as sinful. Actually, the word used is sacred.
Yeah, sacred. That's quite a strong word. And it immediately sets it apart from maybe how culture often portrays it.
Also, what's the contrast they're drawing?
Well, the source suggests the world has kind of distorted its meaning, maybe made it just about pleasure or entertainment.
Okay.
But this view roots it in a divine design. It sees it as originating from God.
And they bring up a specific reference, don't they? Genesis 2.24.
Exactly, that verse. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh.
Powerful image. How does that connect to waiting?
The interpretation presented is that this one flesh bond, this deep union, is the intended place for sexual intimacy.
So waiting isn't a punishment or saying sex is bad.
Not at all, according to this text. It's framed more as protecting something incredibly precious, something meant for the commitment of marriage.
Right. The text uses an analogy, comparing it to valuable things we guard.
That's a key illustration they use. If something is really valuable, you don't just leave it lying around, right?
You protect it.
You protect it. You treat it with care. The idea is to apply that same thinking to sexual intimacy, reserving it for the secure, committed context of marriage.
Which leads us straight to the big question. Why wait? What's the rationale provided?
Well, the argument isn't about arbitrary rules. It frames God's commandments, including those around sex, as being for our protection, not just restriction.
Protection? How?
They reference 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 3-5. It talks about being sanctified, avoiding sexual immorality, and controlling one's own body in a way that's holy and honorable.
Okay, so controlling the body, holy and honorable. How does waiting achieve that, according to the source?
It's seen as aligning with God's will, first off, but then they detail specific benefits.
Like what?
Things like honoring God with your body, which is a recurring theme. Also building a foundation of trust for the future marriage.
Trust, okay. That makes sense. What else?
Avoiding what they call emotional baggage and guilt.
Right. That comes up a lot in these discussions. What's the thinking there?
The idea is that sex creates a very deep bond, emotionally and spiritually, not just physically. And if that bond forms outside the commitment of marriage and the relationship maybe doesn't last, it can lead to hurt, regret, kind of a fragmentation.
So waiting is seen as safeguarding against that emotional fallout.
Pretty much. It allows, in this view, for a sort of clean slate approach to marital intimacy.
And they also mention self-control as being vital. Why is that so important?
Yes. Learning self-control in this area is presented almost like training.
Training for what?
For the rest of the relationship, really. For commitment, faithfulness, navigating challenges together. If you can exercise discipline here, the argument goes, it strengthens your character for the long haul of marriage.
It builds relational muscle, you could say.
That's a good way to put it, relational muscle.
There's also this contrast they draw between the world's focus on instant pleasure and their idea of an eternal purpose.
Yes, that's a fundamental clash of values highlighted in the text.
How does that distinction help understand the call to wait?
It suggests that a culture pushing for immediate gratification misses a bigger picture. This perspective advocates for delaying that gratification, believing it aligns with a deeper, more spiritual purpose.
So short-term pleasure versus long-term fulfillment within marriage.
Exactly. They argue that sex outside marriage ultimately leads to negative consequences, whereas reserving it leads to, well, positive ones within God's design.
Okay, but let's be real. Sexual desire is, well, it's real.
Yeah.
Does the source acknowledge that?
Oh, absolutely. It's very clear on that. Desire itself is presented as God-given, a natural part of being human.
So feeling desire isn't the issue.
Correct. The distinction they make is crucial. Feeling the desire is natural, not sinful. Acting on it outside of the context they define as God's will, which is marriage, that's where they see it as crossing a line into sin.
It's the action, not the feeling.
Precisely. It's about managing that feeling according to their understanding of divine guidelines.
And they acknowledge it's a struggle.
Right.
even for deeply committed people. They mentioned Matthew 26.41.
The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Yeah, including that verse is important. It normalizes the struggle.
It says, look, this is hard for everyone.
Right. It suggests that even with the best intentions, our human nature, our flesh, can pull us towards acting on those impulses.
So it acknowledges the difficulty, but does it offer any solutions or help? Yes, and that's key. It doesn't just say struggle harder. It points towards divine help. They reference 1 Corinthians 10.13.
What's the gist of that verse?
It essentially says, God is faithful. He won't let you be tempted beyond what you can handle, and when temptation comes, he'll provide a way out so you can endure it.
A way out.
Yeah.
Okay, what does that look like practically? Does the source give examples?
It does. Very practical things, especially for people dating, like consciously avoiding situations where you're alone and temptation might be stronger.
Setting boundaries.
Setting boundaries, exactly. Yeah. Also, guarding your eyes and mind, being careful about what you watch or think about.
Makes sense.
Anything else?
Seeking support is a big one. Talking to trusted mentors or having accountability partners. You're not meant to fight this alone.
Community support.
And prayer, of course. Directly asking for strength.
So these are tangible steps, not just wishful thinking.
Right. And the source also makes the point that resisting temptation isn't just about avoiding sin, it actually builds strength.
How does that work? Think of it like exercise again. Every time you successfully resist, you're strengthening that muscle of self-discipline, your reliance on God's help.
So each victory makes the next challenge a little easier.
That's the idea. It builds spiritual and emotional resilience over time.
Okay, let's pivot a bit. The source talks about the beauty of waiting. That sounds much more positive than just, restriction.
It definitely reframes it. The beauty lies in seeing waiting as preparing something wonderful.
Preparing what?
A gift, essentially. A gift for your future spouse. A gift that says, I valued this, I protected this for you within this commitment. It's characterized by love, honor, and intentionality.
That's a powerful concept.
Yeah.
And it connects to the idea of starting marriage with a clean slate, right? No regrets or comparisons.
The envisioned benefit is entering marriage without the shadows of past sexual relationships causing insecurity or, comparison.
Which you'd think would build trust.
Exactly. It allows the couple, ideally, to build their sexual intimacy purely with each other on a foundation of mutual respect and shared commitment to God's design as they see it.
The source also uses Proverbs 5, doesn't it? About rejoicing in the spouse of your youth.
Yes, verses 18 and 19. Rejoice in the wife of your youth. Be intoxicated always in her love.
Sounds pretty positive about sex within marriage.
Very positive. It's used to show that God's intention within marriage is for deep pleasure, joy, and fulfillment in that intimacy.
So the argument is, waiting is the way to fully unlock that intended joy.
That's the connection they make, yes. By honoring the boundary beforehand, you're supposedly better prepared to experience the fullness of the blessing within marriage without complications.
Now, this is really important. What about people listening who feel like, well, I've already crossed those lines. Maybe they feel it's too late for them. Does the source address that?
It does, and thankfully it offers a strong message of hope here. It doesn't just condemn.
What does it offer?
It brings in the concept of Jesus' redemption, the core Christian message of forgiveness. It emphasizes that no mistake, no past action is too big for God's grace.
So it's not an unforgivable mistake in this view.
Not at all. They point to 1 John 1.9. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just, and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness.
Forgiveness and purification, that's a powerful offer.
It means there's always a chance for a fresh start. The message is very much, it's never too late to choose purity starting now.
That's vital. So whether someone is single, dating, engaged, if they feel they've made choices they regret,
they can make a new commitment today. They can decide from this moment on to honor God with their bodies and relationships according to this perspective.
And what about their future? Does a past mistake ruin the possibility of a blessed marriage, according to this?
No, the reassurance is strong on this point. A future marriage can still be incredibly blessed, still be beautiful. Your story isn't over.
That emphasis on redemption and new beginnings is crucial.
Absolutely. It counters potential despair and highlights that change and healing are possible through grace.
Okay, so wrapping up the main points from this 5 minutes Bible perspective. The core message seems to be about holding on to a specific vision for marital intimacy.
holding back from acting on desire outside of that context.
And holding fast to what they present as God's promises about purity, trust, and the right timing.
Yeah, that sums it up well. And the constant thread is that waiting isn't seen as a loss, but actually as a gain, an investment.
An investment in a future marriage built on their understanding of God's design.
Right, which leads to that final, quite profound thought from the source.
Which is,
waiting is worship.
wow, that reframes the entire act, doesn't it? Seeing restraint not just as discipline, but as an act of devotion.
It certainly does. It elevates the choice to a spiritual act.
So for everyone listening, we've explored one particular viewpoint on sex, desire, and waiting for marriage.
It's a perspective that invites reflection, asking you to consider how these ideas about purity, trust, timing, and even worship might resonate or perhaps challenge your own views and choices.
Definitely food for thought. What part of this discussion, this idea of waiting as preparation or even worship, sticks with you the most as you think about relationships? Something to maybe ponder after we finish up here.